we start the next session, which is a presentation where those who have been leading each of the 5 very different work packages that have been the total amount of the Nordic Sustainable Construction Program since 2021 or 22, bit different starts of each of the work packages. You will now, on a silver plate, have 3 years of work, 3 to 4 years of work presented by each of the work package leaders. They will come here in a row rather fast. So hang on. It won't be boring, I hope. And then in the end, we'll have a panel discussion. And we actually already prepared some questions for that discussion. But please, there will also be time for your questions. So if you have questions while they present, wait till after the panel debate, but we really would love your questions. They really help us understand new areas that we maybe didn't think about. So first of all, I'm really pleased to invite a colleague of ours. He's called Harri, and he's from the Ministry of Finland, the Environmental Ministry in Finland. We're very pleased to have you here, Harri, with us. Harri is really nice. He's been working in what we called a sister program, focusing a lot on the circular construction. But you're actually here today on behalf of Maria, who is normally the work package leader, but she is currently in one of those EU Commission meetings where we're actually discussing how we will do LCA in the future in the EU. So she's very well excused. But thank you so much, Harri, for being here. And the floor is yours, telling us about the work we have done in the life cycle assessments. Yeah. Please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Helle. So as Helle told, I'm replacing someone who is much more beautiful than I am. Apologies for that. But now to the subject itself. So I'm trying to explain what happened in this work package 1 in this project. And let's start right away. And as Helle told, I have been coordinating 2 sister projects, this Nordic Networks for Circular Construction. So circularity is my kind of main responsibility in our ministry. And our other project is Nordic Carbon Neutral Bauhaus, which is also, of course, like a relation to this Nordic New European Bauhaus of EU. So here you see the work packages of this, at least tasks of this work package 1, which is called Nordic Harmonization of Life Cycle Assessment. And the beginning of this work started with this task 1, which was called Nordic LCA Practices. And this was kind of like a starting point of finding out what kind of practices we have in Nordic countries in LCA calculations, but also in the approaches in our regulation. So it somehow mapped out where we are, what our other Nordic countries are doing at the moment. And there are some kind of recommendations for the harmonization also, but not so very concrete ones at that stage. Then these tasks 2 and 3 are more related to digitalization of information and data. The task 2 was called Data for LCA, and there the key issue was kind of identifying what kind of data gaps we have on the basis for the calculation, for example, global warming potential, and how this data could be kind of delivered in this calculation in national level. And there was also some recommendations on of the approaches, what should be done in identifying these data gaps and how handling these generic data issues. The third task in this work package was called Building Information Modeling for LCA. And it's, of course, regarding or discussing and handling this, how this data could then bring to this design processes of building. And of course there are also some like approaches that was recommended from this task. Then maybe the most important task for Finland, at least at the moment, is this limit values and monitoring the decarbonization. And there was kind of a aim was to kind of find methods of defining country-specific limit values and kind of giving kind of basics for finding those. And the same in this task, there was also some issues that were connected to this, how this could be monitored on Nordic level and what kind of like advantages there could be in monitoring these issues. And the last, and all these four tasks have already been finished, but this task 5 is still under labor, and it's called acceleration program. And there will, as Maria told me, there will still be 2 webinars on this task. And the 2 kind of subtasks in this task 5 are finding this kind of assistance for online some projects that are kind of assessing this LCA in their projects, and there was some kind of also listing of best examples of these projects in Nordic level. And my other slides, there was a question of how do we see the best outcomes of this work package, and you can see these outlines that Maria has provided for us here in this conference. Yeah, we discussed this with Maria, and we kind of agreed that the whole this work package results somehow the most important value is kind of giving or knowing where other countries are at the moment, kind of getting their feedback on their processes, and maybe also kind of reacting on those, whether there are like challenges, maybe they have like a good practices and so on. So there are, of course, there are some recommendations for harmonization. There are some like first steps that you have to have in order to put it the whole this LCA and global warming potential in your regulation. Something has to be done, and those regulations and recommendations are in this report that we are seeing here today. Maria also raised the issue of this building information modeling as a basis of this LCA processing and designing and its importance. And I can also agree that this is very important when you are making decisions in your building design. What is the kind of optimal like design that you can have in your new building? And of course, Maria also raised the issue of this data needs and scenario settings, the whole life cycle building environment assessment, and how this stage by stage, what are the kind of stages that you have to take on board when you are doing this. Unfortunately, I can't answer detailed questions, but I can try to anyway collaborate.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned, we will not have questions now. We'll just go directly. So next on the floor is Rasmus from Nordic Innovation, and he's been together with Mata, the work package leader of Work Package 2. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so my name is Rasmus Malmborg. I work for Nordic Innovation. Let me see, is that the right way? Here we go. And basically, Nordic Innovation is part of the Nordic Council of Ministers, but we very clearly focus on working with companies or with organizations that work with companies. So that's also been our role in Work Package 2. Um, just a quick overview of the key projects that we have run. As you can see, we are focusing quite a lot on circularity. We are working on collaborating or ensuring that the work in the Work Package 2 also supports or works with other initiatives that we run at Nordic Innovation, or that's being run by other work packages within the program. Some of the achievements here are that we have been supporting the Nordic Blue Building Alliance. If you don't know what the Nordic Blue Building Alliance is, I really think that you should have a talk with Peter Vangsbo from ARP, who's sitting down here, who will be happy to tell you more about that. Clearly, from a Nordic innovation perspective, having more marine-based biomaterials in the construction center or sector in the Nordics is a good way to actually bring down the CO2 amount being used in the construction sector. So for us, that's important. Secondly, we've worked quite a lot with cities, Nordic cities in the Nordic Smart City Network. We believe, as we also saw earlier, that cities is a very important part of innovation centers in the Nordics. And clearly, they are also big procurers. So it's important to work with them because they can push the agenda of being more circular and more sustainable. We know that construction companies, the private sector in general, relies on knowing what the policies are for making big economic decisions. Hence, getting big companies to actually get on board with what it is we believe is the way forward, getting Rampel on board, getting Sweco and other big construction companies on board, has been a big achievement from our part. We see that there is movement in that direction. That's important. Lastly, we are also working on getting basically a retrade system up and running, a platform up and running in the Nordics, so that we can use and sell used building materials across the Nordics. And Jan Thomas, sitting down here, is actually leading that project. I encourage you to have a quick talk with him later on. If you want to know more about that, it's a very interesting project, and in our opinion, there is a very, very big potential in reused building materials in the Nordics. I just also would like to highlight this report. You will find the pamphlet over there. This report is also part of what we've been doing. This tells the story about the Nordic cities. How is it actually to implement circular projects in the Nordic cities? And in our opinion, that's something that's actually worth knowing. So take a look at it if you want. In our opinion, it's a very good report. Now, just a quick sort of deep dive. Well, it's not going to be a deep dive because I'm running out of time, but a quick overview at least of the cities and other projects that we've been running. Partners here, Tampere has been the lead on the city project. We have seen the difficulties in actually using concrete slabs in new buildings in various cities. In our opinion, it's interesting. Again, take a look at the reports. A lot of key lessons learned. You will find that both in the pamphlet and in the report. The retrade project you'll hear more about later on today from me, and please talk to Jan Thomas. We have just started a project that will also continue running in our new program period starting from January 2025, where we have set aside a substantial amount of money to work with 18 Nordic cities in the Nordic Smart City Network. Clearly, construction will be a key component in how we get cities to become more circular and how we can get more innovation going there. So basically, we will continue to work with Nordic companies, regardless of whether or not we are part of this program. It will certainly be part of the initiatives in Nordic innovation going forward. And we will, as I said, also collaborate with the Nordic cities. That's all for me. Thank you.
Tack Agnes. Thank you very much, Rasmus, for a speedy way through all the achievements. Very interesting. And now I'd like to invite the work package leader of work package 3 on the stage, Pernille Mulvey from Sustain Nordic. The floor is yours.
Is it working? Yes, it is. Okay, Sustain Nordic, Work Package 3, Sustain Nordic. Sustain Nordic is a brand that we sort of brought to a sort of a next life from a project that was before this one. So we've used the platforms from this project, so that's why it has a name. So we have worked from a purpose of reaching out to the sector. So what we wanted to do was to map out the system around sustainable conduct in construction in the Nordics and sort of identify the levers and the barriers for the use of sustainable and resilient materials in architecture. And we look at materials and sustainability in a wide sense, so we don't look at specific materials, but sort of materiality in general. And then we set out to gain an understanding of the role of governance and architecture in adopting these principles, figuring out how can that support the sector. So as I said, we wanted to examine the barriers and opportunities as sort of understood by the industry, so as perceived by the industry. And those are the barriers and opportunities for introducing or reintroducing place-based and nature-based practices as well. And finally, we wanted to draw all the conclusions from the sector and sort of put them into a set of recommendations to feed to the development of the Nordic vision that we heard about before. So in general, we've been learning from the sector. That's been our methodology. And the results are based on knowledge that has been gathered through input from 160 experts. And by expert, we mean people on the ground. So that would be industry players, both from big and small companies, but also practitioners, policymakers, and activists, so people within and around the sector. And we've done that through 39 interviews, 34 events, 4 roundtable conversations, and we've condensed the knowledge from there into 8 publications and made events with, in total, over 950 participants that have also sort of contributed directly or indirectly. All of the conclusions here have been collected in a set of policy recommendations in a report that has a link here to norden.org where you can find it. And I guess the slides will be sent out. And the report is basically, I mean, I could just say what Salt said, because it's more or less the same thing, just with a Nordic context. So to give you an overview of the overarching keep taking it down. Maybe I should lean it here. An overarching view of the recommendations. It's focusing on preservation and adaptive reuse. So that says that is more or less summed up in prioritizing retrofitting and transformation rather than building new. And that is to reduce resource use, of course, and to preserve cultural heritage. Then there's been a strong focus on reducing per capita square meters. And this is to respond to sort of a very changed demographics. So where family structures look different, so we need different kinds of housings. And this will then sort of go into a sort of a shift from a material consumption to a sustainable value creation focus. Finally, place-based and user-driven community development is also a focus areas. And finally, we need to look at transparent and holistic assessment, so sort of creating level playing field under regulation that is sort of centered around clear carbon measures. And I don't have much time left, but we've also done a collaboration with Work Package 2 that you heard about before, where we've been focusing on SMEs, looking at material innovation. And the conclusions from here is that we already have all the nature-based and circular solutions to transform the construction sector to operate within planetary boundaries. And The main hindrance and also the main opportunity is legislation and the level of climate ambition in there. Then there's a conclusion that we don't need any more new square meters to be added to the building mass in the Nordics to cover the need for housing. And then again, the repetition of the need to create level playing field under Paris compliant legislation. And that's it for me.
Hvor du skal tage den med ned. Thank you very much, Pernille, for another fast run through. Are you still hanging on? Also, you online? It's okay. Thank you very much, Pernille. And now I'm very pleased to give the floor to Bjørn, who's been the work package leader of work package 4, focusing on emission-free construction site. And Bjørn is from the Ministry of Infrastructure in Iceland. Give him a warm welcome. Please, Bjørn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm Bjørn Carlson, advisor at the Ministry of Infrastructure, and so I've been project leader for Work Package 4. I also work as a professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of Iceland. I have to say that most of the work in Iceland has been controlled and conducted by the Housing and Construction Authority. I see that the Director General of the Housing and Construction is actually with us today, and in cooperation with mostly the Green Building Council in Iceland, and of course a very widespread of stakeholders working together with us in Iceland. And then we've also had a great cooperation with the other Nordic countries. I'd like to especially mention Work Package 1, our Finnish friends who worked very much on the life cycle assessment methodology. Very early on, we decided if you're going to reduce emissions on construction sites, you have to be able to measure something. And we early on decided we're going to use the LCA methodology, worked on with our friends, adding some things to do with electrical diggers and stuff like adding a few things. But basis is the LCA methodology. I have 2 slides for you today. I only have a few minutes, so I'll just go very briefly to this. One key lesson that we've learned is that we have to put an emphasis, greater emphasis on the planning and design stage. Typically, in a construction project, you'll have about 3 or 4% of the total construction cost is the design phase, planning phase. I think that society, stakeholders, and we have to get used to the idea that we must expand this phase. We have to work much more on planning and design if we're going to reduce emissions. We have to be able to revisit the design, check out various different possibilities. And we have to get used to the society, the stakeholders, and the industry has to get used to this idea. The only way to reduce emissions is really in this stage. All the logistics, all the transportations, all the waste, all the building materials coming into the site, all this stuff requires a lot of logistics and a lot of planning. And therefore, we will have to expand this. It's too late to try to do this once you start construction. It's just too late. Everything will be messed up. Also, the industry is, in general, driven by short-term, of course, growth. Everything has to happen really fast. The investors, they've borrowed a lot of money from the banks. They have to repay this quickly. It all has to go quickly. And sometimes this is the priority rather than the long-term sustainability. You often sacrifice that. So it's kind of, but we will have to do this. Now, stakeholders' role. I mean, we published very recently, our most recent is the guidelines, practical methods for planners, designers, and others. We're talking about the owners, the investors, the designers, the contractors, and of course the authority try to find incentives and regulatory framework to enhance this. And so I only have 2 slides. This is one, but I'd like to, point out the guidelines with the practical advice to different stakeholders to implement emission-free construction methods to help us on the way. My other slide has to do with barriers to reducing emissions. We also did quite a lot of work on this, and there are several different barriers. They can be a legal nature or organizational nature and so on, so financial nature, whatever. We found that one of the big ones is communication gaps. There's a misunderstanding in communications. The trucks to pick up the waste arrive a day early, etc. The waste isn't ready, and so on. There are mistakes in communication. This reduces efficiency in a project, but also increases emissions. It's a significant barrier. Poor communication leads to logical issues, and logistics planning is a key here. Also, the time and cost pressures that I mentioned earlier, which is a hallmark of the construction industry, really, they have a tendency to prioritize short-term growth and not long-term sustainability. And we have to get used to overcoming this challenge. Thereby, again, to my first slide, plan more, spend more time in planning. Another issue here, my final issue really is, we've talked about this here, we have to use the existing, we have to use the existing building stock to a far greater extent. Instead of using a lot of fancy words here to describe this, I'm just going to give you a very clear, short, practical example. In Reykjavik, we had a huge, big hotel, Hotel Saga. It sort of lost its purpose. It was built in the 1960s, and now we had to rebuild. And we did the designs and stuff like that, figured out that if we're going to demolish the building responsibly and build a new one, the cost is certain. But reusing the building, using the structural strength of the existing building would cost just about as much. And adapting the building, it's similar costs. However, the emissions would be extraordinary in the new one. You'd have to collapse it, demolish all the concrete, get all the reinforced steel out, sort all this stuff, get all the timber, sort everything out, transport, probably most of it land in landfill, etc. And then you'd have to dig a huge big hole with all the waste that this entails, or a double parking garage and so on. So to summarize, I see that the hell is summarize. 2 key factors. We have to get used to using much more time in the planning and design phase. The industry has to adapt to this. We have to do it. We can't lower emissions if we don't do that. Second observation, we have to use our existing building stock to a far greater extent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Björn, for a very dedicated presentation of the results. I think there's a lot of takeaways there. And now we are on to work package 5, which I'm actually the work package lead of, but I've done it in a very close collaboration with my colleagues. Some have worked there earlier. They are here today, so I'm very pleased. But I've been more like both secretary leader and then work package leader. So I will share the floor with some of those providing a lot of the efforts. So on stage is now Coco, who is the project leader of the helping that we have the skills needed for this transition. Please, Coco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helle. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I will be talking about competences, especially handcraft competences for reuse in construction, which I think is a cornerstone to achieving this green transition that we are all working towards. And I will just very quickly frame the challenge that we are facing. We have an aging construction workforce, meaning that in 2035, a lot will have retired or will be about to retire. So we need new hands into the sector, and we need to make the sector attractive for young people. But at the same time, as you all know, a lot is happening. We are seeing new digital tools, we are seeing new construction materials being developed, and also regulation coming from the countries and from EU, and a new focus on maintaining what we already have. And that means that not only do we need new hands, we also need to upskill the workforce that is already there. And to contribute to this, we have in Work Package 5 created an educational material focusing on the vocational schools in the Nordics. It's called Skills for Reuse, and it is a free educational universe available on an online platform. It is in 7 different languages. The Faroese version is brand new. We are very excited about that one. And it consists of 3 courses. One introduction course to sustainability, circularity, design for disassembly, and then 2 other courses diving into wood and brick and how to actually reuse these materials. And what I really like about this educational material is that it's very diverse. It has videos and quizzes and facts, but also some very practical exercises for the students to learn how to reuse the materials. And we have put a great effort into making it easy for the teachers to use, but also engaging for the students. So we have gotten, luckily, some very positive feedback on the educational material, both in the test phase, but also in our dissemination to the Nordic vocational schools. I want to highlight this one quote from a vocational teacher who I like this quote both because he points to the teacher's guides as something that's useful, but also because he talks into our vision with the educational material, which is to be upfront with some of the new requirements that will come to the vocational schools as to sort of adapt to have more focus on green skills. So I guess one thing that I really want to underline is that it takes time to make educational material. It takes time to get it out to the schools and for the teachers to go through it and choose to implement it in their everyday teaching. So I think it's really important that we look towards the future and have an eye out for new materials, new trends, new digital tools, and are able to translate that into education so that we try to have the muscle to make sure that when the students are done with their education, they have the newest possible skills to sort of face the challenges that we are all meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coco, for sharing all the work that's been done. 7 languages, we're quite proud of that. And as I said, it's a team effort. And Marcus, who is here behind, he's been helping us a lot, or in charge of our knowledge. So I'm just sharing this slide that we've done a lot, of course, in super close collaboration with all the work packages. So it's not 30 reports that we have made. It's a collaborative effort, but, just to brag. And we do have a website and a LinkedIn, and of course, you're most welcome to follow us and be part of that knowledge sharing. And then we've done one other thing back in for a long time. The Nordic construction authorities and also sometimes the ministries have discussed how do we do this new generation of Eurocode standards. The EU have just agreed how they should be more or less finished. And now around 2027, all the countries have to implement the national annexes. Eurocode means a lot, decides a lot how we actually build. I think that's the short version of what it is. It's a lot of work, but the Nordic countries have come together and said it's a thing we need to work together on. So we made this Nordic priority paper where we say we should harmonize and also find green benefits in some of the national adaptation processes. So we're not aiming for full harmonization. It's maybe not possible, I think, but we try to harvest the very low-hanging fruits, and we want to do that with this collaboration. So what we've done is that we have a lot of discussions, really building on the experts that are already out there working with these very detailed elements of Eurocodes, and these 8 groups already in the process, and we will. They have in November, and 22nd of November, they have shared which potential they see. So we have I see a basket of a lot of potentials that we have spent some time identifying, and now we of course hope that in a new phase it will be possible to give efforts and muscles into this collaboration and actually harvest some of it. So that was work package 5, and then maybe to try to bind it all up. What are our key results? It's always hard, but we've definitely been part of actually accelerating this green transition that we are all part of, contributing with knowledge, specific examples, and this conversation that the Nordic countries, so often the authorities in charge of the building regulations, have had on a very regular basis. A lot of them are here present today. So that was the fast one because I'm out of time. So now I'll really like to ask all the work package leaders to come on stage. I will have that chair, but please maybe go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Coco as well. I have my watch there. Yeah. So I'll try not to fall out of stage. Maybe that will work fine. So we've been collaborating really closely, and you all presented your key results nicely. It's kind of difficult to do that in 5 minutes. So that's why we wanted some dialogue, but also for you to digest and be able. I'm sitting a bit on my back, sorry. Is it okay? Yeah. I'm cropping out. You'll save me. It's okay. Okay. So you can consider also your own questions. So Hardy, I would like to ask with you, as you're here representing Work Package 1, the Nordic harmonization of LCAs. So what differences has it made for Finland, the Ministry of Environment, to be leading the work package? And can you maybe give some specific examples of how you've been able to utilize some of the knowledge that you gained in your current process of developing this regulation of climate impact of construction?
Yeah, as was said, I myself wasn't included or member of this group, but what I discussed with Maria, I heard that the main kind of like a gain that we had been leading this group was the collaboration, and discussion that we had with the Nordic colleagues, and if some details should be picked from these harmonization exercises and recommendations, maybe the ones that are touching these limit values, and we knowing that Denmark was the worst to kind of implementing these limit values in your regulation was something that we of course looked at, because we are doing the same at the moment in Finland. But in general, I think that this collaboration itself was so valuable. I think it's for us all somehow very kind of sound competition of who is being first of implementing regulation. I noticed that, and all political leaders, we also noticed that saying that, okay, Sweden is doing this now, and Denmark is at the moment they are leading. They are considering whether we should choose something more.
Thank you very much, Harry, for that example. So the collaboration and the common knowledge pool to really make informed regulation. Thank you. Then I'll move to you, Rasmus. You have mapped the current best practice of how cities are using their procurement muscle to push the market for more circularity. But can you pin out some examples that you see great potential in upscaling?
Yeah, I can at least point to a few. I mean, we note that the cities have had challenges actually doing this. It's not that easy. I mean, even though we may have overarching regulation that on paper should make it easy, in reality, it's actually pretty difficult for cities to do this. So I think for us, the important thing has been to say, well, you know, what is it that cities can actually do to get the thing going, get the ball rolling? And what we see is that they need to work across internal departments in a different way than what they've done before. There are a lot of key players in big mechanisms as municipalities or cities that needs to be lined up correctly in order to actually implement circular or sustainable construction projects. What we've also seen quite clearly is that the collaboration with private companies is key. If the dialogue is not really functioning, it becomes quite sort of problematic. And all the cities that we have worked with are quite sort of clear on this, that the interaction and common understanding with construction companies are very important.
Thank you for highlighting those examples. I think I've heard it before. Collaboration across sectors, where we really try that as well.
Yeah.
But it's nevertheless important, and we're in our third, you know, it's not it demands a lot. Yeah. So thank you, Rasmus, and Pernille, over to you for work package 3. With the Nordic recommendations that you just showed before to prioritize material reuse, recycling, and bio-based options, what systematic change that you have highlighted as a need, both technical and culturally, are needed in your views and based on the knowledge you created to elevate these principles into widespread practices?
Yeah. It will sound like a broken record, but what we've heard from the sector, and that is regardless of whether we've been talking to small companies or big players, sort of the main message has been that we need a cultural shift. Oh, there it works.
It works. It just, I don't think it likes to be in there. Yeah, it's that special touch.
Better now?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so regardless of whether we've been talking to the civil society or the big players or the smaller players, everyone have pointed towards a need for a sort of a cultural shift or a value shift, going away from eternal growth to a sufficiency regime, as we've heard also with Salt's conclusions here. And that requires kind of a sort of we've been hearing sort of topics such as ecologic economy and life-centric worldview and even degrowth, but at least sufficiency has been mentioned again and again and again. And that is a prerequisite if we want to operate within the planetary boundaries that we need to change our approach to this. So that is kind of on a higher cultural or systemic level. On a more practical level, we've met a lot of conclusions that, or people that point towards that we cannot rely on a few do-gooders to to fix it for us, and neither can we rely on tech fixes. So what we need is to create sort of politically create a level playing field for all the players in the market to operate under the same rules that are planetary boundary compliant. So that means that we have all these sort of pieces of legislations that now kind of stand in the way of each other or cancel each other out, and we need a hierarchy under considerations, and the hierarchy should be organized under the mother of all considerations, so both financially and health and safety wise, which is climate. So a hierarchy of legislation organized under climate to create a level playing field for all.
Thank you, Pernille, for highlighting that. And now over to you, Bjørn, work package 4, the emission-free construction site. You talk really well about it. When we talk about emission-free construction sites, we often think about emission-free machinery. But you highlighted that that's not all. So can you maybe give some examples of what other elements to look at, and maybe also what was part of the Nordic Ministers of Construction and Housing's declaration?
This is true. Many people think about, if we use electrically driven machinery on construction sites, but there's a lot more. And in our project, we have highlighted many other things. We must think about the transportation to and from site. So we look at that, and then we look at all other on-site activities, also the carbon footprint of the new building materials that we transport to the site, and this includes also the energy use and all that, but also the waste production. There's one alarming fact: about 30 to 40% of the total global urban waste production is construction, and it is prophesied. This is now about 12.7 billion metric tons, but people say it's going to increase by 100% until the year 2050. Have to do something about waste from construction sites. And in our project, so we have, this is a very severe impact on emissions. And in our project, we focused on a holistic view, looking at all the aspects and trying to use a measuring device, LCA methodology, with additions for things, especially interested in construction sites. So we have a measuring device to try to measure and revisit design and planning and logistics until we can minimize this. But the waste production is a thing we have to focus on. So in some countries, some places, you might be able to switch over to electrically driven machinery. In other countries, you maybe don't have the chance to do that. Then you have a chance to focus on waste production and things like that. And that's this comprehensive approach we've been focusing on, I think.
Thank you, Bjørn. So, of course, emission-free construction sites is one part, but machinery is one part, but there's more to it. Thank you for highlighting that. And then Coco, you showed really nicely the materials that has been made freely available. Many of us or countries are now in the process of either having the last discussions or implementing limit values for how much CO2 you can emit per square meter, sometimes per year. So with these new demands, climate demands and limit values being implemented in the Nordic countries, and also as discussed with the Energy Performance of Building Directive, it will also be all over Europe in 2030, limit values. So do you see, what does that mean for the reduction of low carbon materials and reuse, and which role do you see that handcraft have in this transition?
Thank you, Pelle. I think that handcraft workers, they play quite a significant role in reducing emissions and CO2 in the construction sector, because it all comes down to the fact that we need to build in a new way. And the people who actually can do that with their hands need to have the right knowledge and competences in order for us to achieve our goals. We can develop a lot of new materials, but they are not very useful unless someone actually knows how to build with them. And the same goes for the digitalization. If we don't get the right data from the actual construction sites, then it's not very useful. I also think it's very important that at the construction sites, that there are someone who have the right mindset or the eye for what can actually be reused. How do we manage our waste? And actually finds it important, because I want to acknowledge that it takes longer time to maintain or to build with reused materials. It is a different type of handcraft than building with new materials that have the exact dimensions every time. So I think it's important that the handcraft workers can see the meaning in learning this and in doing this. But at the same time, I also think it's the future. So
That's a good recap. Thank you. And now I'll go back to Harry, so maybe the microphone. I'll ask you questions again. The answers have to be a bit more, bit short. Yeah. So we think the program has come a long way in developing coming methodology for how to calculate and regulate the climate. I think he turns it up when it's time. The climate impact of whole life cycle of buildings. But what do you think is crucial to go forward? What should we focus on if we get the funds together to collaborate in the future?
No, anyway, we have noticed that there's so much that we can harmonize. The regulation as a whole, holistically, we can harmonize. There's so big differences in our approaches in Nordic countries. We noticed that perhaps this A module could be something that we could do more on Nordic level, because it's something that we could also benefit our industry, because we have these product manufacturers that could kind of use this Nordic market as a starting point, and then kind of spread to all of Europe. Of course, there's this how to influence this European policies is important. European this energy performance of buildings directive is very topical at the moment, and of course there's big issues to be decided there, and we can be kind of harmonized and at the same level here bring messages to Commission. Those are them, I think, that the most important ones. But then I will also like highlight this issue of these existing buildings, which has been also raised in many speeches today. We should maybe find some ways to policies even in the European level, and make like proposals on that, because we have now noticed that it's so crucial in our climate policies in all Nordic countries and all of Europe. When you talk about like a global south, it's a different position, but here in Europe, it's very crucial.
Thank you, Hardy. So there's still more to do to make it efficient, and maybe digitalization will do some, and then also we should focus on the existing. Thank you. And then over to you, Rasmus. In your work package, you are now funding the retrade that you talked about with Jan and Thomas. It's leading. How do you see this platform developing in the future?
Well, I think for us it makes a lot of sense to try to ensure that there is better access to used building materials for environmental purposes, obviously, but creating such a marketplace as a platform also, in our opinion, ensures that the efficiency is better. I.e., regardless of where you are in the Nordics, you will be able to access used building materials easily. That will bring down costs. We know that there are several Nordic countries where there's not much production of construction material. Iceland, Faroe Islands, Greenland, certainly 3 countries where we see a lack of that. And then, I mean, just lastly, I think it's important to say that we are not, we're not trying to compete with the EU in any way. On the contrary, we would like to sort of clean up our own house in the Nordics before we are able to show what can be done in a greater scale within the EU. So that's why.
Thank you. So yeah, we need something to buy to be able to use it again. So, Pernille, in your huge knowledge gathering that you showed before, I think was it 900 and something people use and how been engaged with it. You really did a huge job across the Nordics and at the new European Bauhaus festivals and so on, and the COP even. You identified several financial mechanisms such as tax incentives, grants, or penalties that are barriers towards a construction sector with less negative impact on climate and the environment. Can you shortly pinpoint maybe two financial mechanisms that you identified?
Yes. So the big one that everybody turned to was the tax on carbon. So that's across the whole value chain, so both on demolition and on construction. And then the second thing is tax incentives for keeping existing buildings rather than demolishing. So that's kind of the quick answer.
Thank you. That was quick and to the point. Björn, one method to achieve lower emissions and less waste on the construction site is to have more time in the planning and design stage. But how do you convince a developer to spend that time? Time is money,
I
I've
mean,
heard.
this is quite obvious. I mean, we all know this is true. I mean, one of the best ways to reduce emissions and reduce waste is to spend more time on planning and design. Revisit the design again, testing new materials and things like that until you're ready. It's quite clear. I mean, it's very logical that the longer you know, not too long, but longer you do the planning and design, the careful planning and design leads to a significant saving in emission. Ensures a very fast, well-driven project. It's logical, but however, construction industry, there's always a however. The construction is a very traditional industry. We've always done it this way. We're going to continue doing it. So we have to try to press this, and the industry as a whole has to realize we've got to expand the planning and design phase. We have to expand it if we're going to get any success in reducing waste and reducing emissions.
Thank you. That's good elaboration. So it's a good investment to spend more time in the beginning. Cool. So have you experienced or heard about any interest in this material? Like, do the students want these new skills? And what do you think will be important skills to have in the future? Now we did some, but are there more?
I definitely think that the new generation of handcraft workers have a lot of visions and awareness about the change that needs to happen. And in my experience, they are actually asking for or even demanding to have new green focus at the vocational schools. So that is definitely there, and we need to make sure that the material actually exists to give them that. But at the same time, I also think it's important that to focus on the bridge from going from the education and to the real world, and to sort of use the motivation that they have, and not just tell them that it's unrealistic or that that's not how we usually do things, but actually listen to the ideas that they have.
That's
Uh,
good. Mhm.
and about the future need for education, I definitely think that a lot will come within digitalization and AI, and I think it will be difficult to make the material fast enough, because yeah, it's going really fast. And I also think that this new focus on maintaining what we have is something that we will need to have more education about in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. That was that part. So I think we can clap for that part. Well done. So, and now it's time for the questions we didn't ask. So it's time that you can put your questions. I don't know when we'll have these people on stage together again. So are there any questions to the panel? And please, when you do have, say your name and where you're from. Yeah, so we start here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mikko from Finland, great presentations and talks about what has been discovered in these work packages. This is comment question about the planning. I agree with the fact that more planning or more efficient planning is needed. It's also about the quality of the planning and what phases of the planning different things are done, not just planning as a whole. But we need also different construction models, contract models where things are taken into considered. And we are using also in Finland this kind of collaboration construction models, and where there's a kind of certain development phase, and that is used, for example, in alliance model construction models, where these kind of difficult questions can be thought together and also a phase where you take also the construction company to the table so that they would also realize the design. So when you think about more planning, has this come also up that maybe taking also the other parties to the table, not just the planners, but also the other parties.
Thank you. You want to comment on
Yeah, just very
the
quickly,
elaboration?
this is absolutely true. I mentioned mostly the designers and the contractors and maybe the investors, but you have to get the other people, especially the official, you have to have contracts and initiatives also from authorities, and they have to lead the way in their contracts. This is right. You have to take everybody to the table.
And Hadi, you'd like to elaborate? Maybe.
I just have to add that, of course, this life cycle analysis taken into on board in this design process itself, and having the global warming potential and kind of considering which are the most important issues in this project. That also needs more time for the design phase itself.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you got to plan that one well. Thank you. Are there more questions? Yeah, Jan van der Hoes, please. And yes. Okay.
Jan Boström from Sundö, Sweden. And I say it's very fascinating with the educational material you presented, Coco, which I agree is great because there is need for new skills to get this to happen, to build in a different way. Then reflecting also on what Björn said there about the process, are there any thoughts or plans about extending that materials to other actors, really, within the construction industry? Because if we're going to look a bit further in the future, make it easier to, well, reuse buildings for other purposes than they were originally designed for, which we want to, and also reuse the materials. We might also think about more how we design those buildings now for the mountability, as you said there, and for higher transformation capacity and things like that. And that's probably more on the design phase and the architect's phase, or the, well, construction, well, planning. And yeah, that would be great with that type of material also for that part of the construction industry.
Thank you.
Just an input.
Maybe a short answer. Should you?
Yeah. It is definitely something we are thinking about, expanding the material So thank you for the comment. It is noted. Um, I don't.
We have that question several times, and there's a lot of stakeholders along the whole value chain of construction who's been a bit, can we say, envy? Like, I also want that, I also want. And actually, we just wanted to target someone, because sometimes you make something that's for everyone, and then sometimes it's then again not really for anyone. But the introduction to this material that Coco told about, the sustainability, can actually be used for many stakeholders. So it's not defined yet who, and I think even just that we chose wood and tile, that's already a huge limitation. There's a lot of crafts. You know it. It's in our construction that could also be. So it's definitely something we debate. And thank you for the input.
And can I maybe just add that a lot of material is also being developed by a lot of other organizations.
Yeah.
So it's also to be on the lookout for to not make the same thing.
Yeah, and you have something.
I just changed the ideas that who is saying something, but there's a big like online learning package produced in this new urban Bauhaus Academy, and this is available already, produced by Finland, Estonia, and Sweden. So, and this is produced for designers and architects.
Yes, thank you. So, Peter?
Thank you so much, work package leads. Really amazing. Thank you so much, Helle, for being able to have steered this crazy ecosystem for the last few years. Really useful, really impactful. It's something which will have a life way beyond the end of today. I'm Peter Bangsbo from Arab. I'm the private sector. Working globally, all what you have done have had so much international recognition. We want to be the most sustainable region in the world. This work that you have done, it would be so useful if we had a kind of a foresight perspective on where we will be in 2050 if all your good initiative was implemented. I'm standing with a lot of useful information here, something that we will work with. But in order to convince the rest of Europe to follow us, we need that documentation. We need that kind of business model so we can prioritize our investment. My question is, how can we do that?
Oh, wow.
Well, I would,
Yeah, Björn,
I would mention that the Nordic vision is that Norden will be the most sustainable region in the world in a few years. This is a huge, huge commitment. This is the Nordic ministers. So let's just say that we are actually aiming there officially. The ministers, the governments have said we are aiming in this direction, and we just have to fight and try.
Thank you.
We are solving it in the next project that will start at the beginning of next year.
Yeah. And do we have more?
Yeah, no, just a quick comment. I think that I agree that foresights are extremely important. I think it would be very, very useful. I guess sometimes the issues with foresights is how do we put in the limits? And I think that would require some discussions of, what is it that we actually try to limit such a foresight to. But agree, yeah, it would be good. And I think the business case would be very useful.
Thank you. A short
comment. So the report that I put a link to on norden.org has a sneak peek into foresight thinking. So that could be a basis for future work.
Link. Yes, and then please.
My name is Valentina. Is it working? Yes. Hi, Valentina from Rockwool, Product Sustainability. I have a question for work package 1. think I would have questions potentially for everybody, but maybe we can
That's
take
for the
them
break,
later.
yeah.
And it's a bit of a more practical questions because you talked about limit values and what is used in the Nordics, but then you also said our project had a task on data and data availability for LCA. So I was wondering if you have looked into data and databases issues with the limit value. And if it is too specific, I have a backup question.
As I said, I am not familiar to the details of these tasks. I think that this issue was touched in this work package at task 2 about
Very
data
good.
availability and credibility of the data. And of course, they are all interlinked, these tasks. So to put in place these limit values, you of course have to have available and reliable data. And I think that there are recommendations touching that.
Yeah, if you're thank you, Heidi, really well answered. But maybe if I can just elaborate a bit, if you're interested in data, then task 2, so data for LCA under work package 1, is super interesting. A lot of data experts really put a lot of efforts into what do we have, the mappings, and actually we didn't have funds to. It was actually 5 reports in one. So don't forget the annexes. There's a lot of good annexes on existing building, on forestry, on what do you call it, like small vegetation. There's a lot of data already, and we do know rubbish in, rubbish out in an LCA. So it's a huge focus. I think we took some of the first steps in this task and really hinted to what do we need to ask more questions. And if we get funding for a new program and enough funding, this is something we will look into, because we also know it can be burdensome for everyone and our construction if we don't get that digitalized well. But we need good data to digitalize.
And the database behind, because one thing is the data that you find in EPDs and data that you provide as in the planning phase in the project, but this is multiplied to another value, and this value makes up of a lot of our whole life carbon limit value. So what we multiply our very good data with also has to be very good, because otherwise we limit the value of having a limit value. But sorry for the pun.
No, it's a very good specific question. So this was the Q&A.